Have you ever had trouble starting to learn or progressing in a new language? Or feel like you can't remember what you've learned or you can't get over the hump from knowing some things to actually speaking? If you have, this video is for you. We're going to talk about 4 things that you might be doing that are hurting your language learning and how to fix those to set you on your way to mastery. I'm Tony, a linguist, and I'm here to share with you what I know about language. Let's get into it. The first mistake is that you aren't training your ear. The idea is that even if you don't understand what's being said, you should be spending time listening attentively to your target language. Listen to individual sounds, what we call in linguistics segmental sounds. Listen for details of these individual sounds, like whether or not stop consonants have a little puff after them, what we call aspiration. Listen to speakers' overall tone, their movements and prosody. The thing is, you've gone your whole life hearing the sounds of maybe 1 or 2 languages. When we're babies, we're able to distinguish between all the sounds of the world's languages, even those sounds that aren't part of the language we're being raised with. But over time, your language system marks the sounds that you're hearing regularly as important, and marks as unimportant the sounds that you don't hear regularly, or the differences between sounds that don't make a difference for the language you speak. And these non-meaningful sounds, or non-meaningful differences, get neglected. What this means is that now, when you hear a sound, you automatically categorize it as a sound you're already familiar with. That is, a sound in the language or languages you already speak. But this categorization system doesn't always work. As an English speaker, you're used to your T's not vibrating when you say them, and having a little puff of air after them. You can try it. Put your hand on your throat and say t, t. There's no vibration in the stop sound. Now, put your hand in front of your mouth. T, t, t. You can feel the puff of air that comes out of your mouth when you say it. You're also used to saying D with the vibration and without the puff. D, d, d. You can feel the throat vibrating. D, d, d. There's no puff. So now, when you hear something like a Spanish T, which doesn't have the puff, but also doesn't have the vibration, what do? You automatically categorize it as either a T or a D that you're familiar with. And how you categorize it is going to depend on different elements of the situation and the environment that it's in. So how can you go about starting to loosen up some of these intuitive perceptions about which sounds are which when you hear them? A great way to do this is to start spending time listening to your target language, even if you don't understand what's being said. You can use podcasts or other forms of talk. Pay attention to what you notice about the sounds. What sounds do you hear? And what sounds do you not hear? If you were just starting Mandarin, for example, you might realize that you never hear the sound ah. But what you'll also start to get a sense of is what sounds you are hearing, and you'll start to be able to get your mouth around the sounds of your new language. For a tonal language like Mandarin, you can also start to get a sense of how many tones there are, where they show up, and how they sound. Now, you're not trying to learn the language just by listening to it until it suddenly clicks. What you are doing is providing input in your new language, which will serve as you learn more, need to produce words yourself, and need to understand what other people are saying. Mistake number 2 is you're not connecting your new language to concepts. Instead of connecting the words and phrases and sentence structures of your new language directly to ideas, you're connecting them first to your native language and then to those ideas. What does this look like in practice? Let's say you set out to learn Italian and you want to learn the word for friend, amico or amica. And every time you want to use the word friend, you first think of it in English and then think of it in Italian and then say it. What you're doing is creating a chain of steps to get from the concept to the word and back. So that when you want to use the word for friend, you have to go from the idea to the word in your native language and then to the Italian, amico. And if you hear amico, you're going to have to go through that process the other direction to get to the meaning. This not only takes more time, which both affects the flow of conversation and the confidence that your interlocutor has in your ability to speak the language, it also creates a mental system which is much more burdensome to operate, especially when you think about doing this for every word that you use in your target language. So what's a different way you could go about this? One thing you can do is to start learning your target language in that language as soon as possible. So, for example, moving from looking up translations into English for every word in your new language, and instead looking up definitions in a dictionary that's written in that language. This will be one way you can keep yourself working in that language, providing practice even while you're doing some learning already, and providing crucial experience with the language. Another strategy I would suggest is using mental imaging to connect the words in your new language, not to words in your native language, but to images that represent those ideas. So, in our example, you wouldn't connect amico to friend in order to remember the word, in order to use it yourself, or in order to understand someone saying it. You would think of the word amico, and then imagine a friend. And then you would attach that word to that image. And you would do that again for other friends, using amica when appropriate. Then imagine 2 people who are friends, and attach amico to one and amica to the other. And as the concepts get more complex, get more creative with the imaging. One more complex case might be indirect pronouns. Indirect pronouns, like Spanish te, me, le, basically mean to me, to you, and to him, her, or them. You can imagine the people you want to use, and then put them in one corner of your frame. Then you add movement. I might repeat to myself, me dio una manzana. He gave me an apple. And imagine an apple and myself on the other side of the frame, with an arrow moving from the apple to me. The more you do this sort of imaging, and the wider the range of images you use, the more the concepts themselves will link up to the words in your new language. This leads into the third mistake you might be making when learning a new language. You're trying to fit your target language into your native language box. It might seem obvious, but other languages don't do things the same way your native language does. An important thing to keep in mind is that every language takes differences in the world that are fuzzy, and then it gives them labels, which makes categories of things, making those things seem more different from each other than they actually are. And different languages do this in ways that aren't easily translated between. Meaning that a language doesn't communicate the same things but with different words, it communicates different concepts as well. Let's look at a simple example having to do with colors. In many languages, the color pink isn't taken to be a basic color. Instead, it's something like a shade of red. In English, on the other hand, we do have a term for this. Pink. And because we have a whole different term for this, English makes it its own category of thing. Languages divide the world up differently. So now that you know this, how can you apply it to your language learning? A powerful way to start opening up your thinking about how things have to be in the world is to start considering the ways that your language divides up the world and ask if it necessarily has to be that way. A simple example is slang terms. In English, you can use the word can for the toilet. Sorry for the example, but we're going somewhere with this. Because this is a slang term, it's easier to see that there's no necessary relationship here. There's no reason can and toilet should refer to the same thing. So, knowing this, it might come as less of a surprise that in some varieties of Spanish, el baño can refer both to the bathroom and the toilet itself. This might not be how it's done in English, but by understanding how it's arbitrary the way it is done in English, it can help to open you up to other ways that things might be done. When you pick apart what feel like natural ways to talk about things, you start to see that the range of natural ways to talk about things is really rather large. Find ways to question how your native language does things, and you'll start to gain a sense of how things could be different in another language. If you want to get deeper into what it means to start learning other categories when speaking a different language, check out this video. I'll also link it down in the description. And our fourth mistake is that you're not talking with native speakers. There are a host of benefits that come from engaging in conversation with native speakers. For one thing, it helps you fix the mistakes we've talked about already. When you're talking to a native speaker, you're training your ear, and there's the necessity to move fast, which forces you to move straight from the concept to the word in your target language. And this speed also helps you to construct the conceptual boxes you need for that language. When I was learning Spanish, this is the thing that absolutely changed my abilities in that language. When I met my wife and started spending time in Mexico with her family, that's when my speaking, but especially my comprehension, rapidly developed. When you put yourself in situations where you have to use the language, you find that you can. But you don't need to go to a foreign country in order to do it. One way to go about this is to set up a language exchange with a friend. You might go out to dinner and agree that for the first half you're going to speak in English, and for the second half you're going to speak in your target language. This is a great way to practice, and all you're doing is having some time with a friend. Yes, it will feel a little awkward at first, but just stick with it. Don't let yourself break the agreement, and don't let your friend break the agreement. And you'll find that before long, it's starting to feel less strange to speak to them in this language. Another way is to make a friend. This can be done online, but also locally where you are. This could be as simple as finding a coffee shop or a different store where you can go and get a drink every day. Find one with a cashier who speaks your target language, and then ask if, when you go in, you can speak to them in their language. The odds are they'll be ecstatic that you asked, and very interested in doing so. Alternatively, you can seek out conversation partners in an online community or in the community you're part of locally, and this will work just as it would with a friend you already have. The fact is, there are lots of people out there learning lots of languages. Whatever your native language, there are people out there who want to learn it. And odds are you'll find someone who speaks a language that you want to learn too. So there are 4 mistakes that you might be making and are holding you back from making gains in your target language. Make sure that you're training your ear, even if you don't understand the words yet, that you're connecting the concepts directly to the words in your target language, that you're being curious about how this language categorizes things differently from your native language, and that you're talking to native speakers often, and you'll start to see the progress you want to see. If you want more content on language and language learning, subscribe to my channel. We'll see you in the next one.